there's this viral component right now where like translation AI has never been more top of mind with the general public. And welcome everyone to Slater Pod. Hello, Esther.
Hi, Florian.
We are back after a super busy couple of weeks, right?
Very busy.
Very busy. In-person conferencing, traveling, hosting.
Working.
Exactly, juggling all the other stuff while we're hosting 150 people here in Zurich. Today, we're going to talk a bit about our latest report, Translation AI, Practical Use Cases for LLMs. Talk briefly about how Ian El-Mokadem, RWS's CEO, what his thesis is that he laid out at SlaterCon, intent to raise some money. You'll talk a bit about media localization, and then I'll close on AI dubbing, which is kind of similar type of space, right? Now, so we released a report called Translation AI for lack of a, it's not for lack of a better term, but it's actually, it's an appropriate title. So Slater Pro Guide, Translation AI, subtitle was 10 Practical Applications of Large Language Models for the Translation and Localization Industry. So after all this kind of macro discussion, we wanted to summarize what we're seeing out there in terms of how you can actually deploy these models in reality, in practice, as opposed to, trying to unpack some of these 100-page research papers and all the kind of also try to cut through all the PR stuff that's out there. So we listed 10 practical use cases. It's available on the website. We have things like, obviously, first one use case would be perform machine translation. We have machine translation quality estimation, which is a really fast rising use case. Make target text SEO friendly, generate multiple target versions. I mean, go get the report. It's incredibly useful. It's also a lot of people are asking for it, and great piece of work by the research team. So SlaterCon, what was your I don't know, not initial impression, but like looking back, it's been almost 10 days. So what was how did you feel about the event?
I liked it. Yeah, it was good. Obviously, our first in-person event since 2019, so somewhat disrupted by the pandemic in the interim. But no, great to get together. I think, a really interesting set of people. I mean, 150 people. There was lots of networking. I myself had a lot of interesting conversations, and then good content, good solid content as well across the speaker lineup. So obviously my favorite was the investor panel that I hosted. But some really great content really throughout the day.
The investor panel really closed the day in a very interesting way. I mean, it was very heavy on kind of the practical translation AI, large language model implications, use cases. We also had John Linder from, looking at it from the accessibility point of view, et cetera, but then closing it on this kind of very succinct, okay, so now that you're an investor, where do you put your money? How do you see the future? And also with the two investors being kind of industry outsiders, of course, they're invested in the industry, but they're looking at it from an outsider perspective. I think it really closed the conference in a very interesting way. So we did have, as you mentioned, 150 people, sold out like 4 weeks ahead of time. I kept joking or trying to make a joke at the conference that like it's okay if you sell out a week ahead. It's not that great if you sell out five weeks ahead. But looks like we could have gotten a bigger venue. Maybe when we do a repeat, we'll get something in a more 200 to 250 people range. Lots happening. I mean, this is a conference season now, conference fall, lots of conference going on. Last week was LockWorld. There's lots of other things coming up, but it looks like the appetite's definitely there. I think the mood was overall very positive, but of course there was an incredible appetite to understand where things are heading.
I think a lot of people looking for answers,
I was put on the spot on stage, like, so what do we do now? I'm like, all right, okay. Went in with like a macro answer, and then like she's like, that was a good answer, but not a great answer. I'm like, not great. I'm like, okay, let me rephrase. So here is a more practical answer. But it's good to be challenged on stage. Now that's on the conference side. That we also actually had our team meetup. Gathered 15 people from Slater, went up to a mountain.
On a train, I have to add, which I think was definitely a better call than having us hike 5 hours up the mountain.
Yeah, we could have hiked up or down. I think I looked it up. It would have been about a 5 hour hike from the lake up to 2,100 meters. I don't know, what's that, like 6,000 something feet? Yeah, incredible views, incredible kind of meeting facilities, etc. So we got together with the team. Of course, had our most recent hire, senior researcher Alex Edwards, join and kind of share a bit his perspective on what we do from the outside. So yeah, very interesting, very inspiring to get to meet the people, because we're a remote first company, and yeah, very good to meet everybody in person. Now, also very good to meet was Ian El-Mokadem, the CEO of RWS, one of the leading language service providers, language technology providers, result of a number of mergers. We had, of course, Moravia and then SDL. So this is, definitely top 2, top 3 super agencies in the world. He gave a very kind of, open and honest overview, I have to say, in his keynote at SlaterCon. He said he speaks to investors all the time. He kind of needs to show that he's aware of the challenges that all this AI kind of disruption now is bringing, but also present like the conviction that they have in the future of the business, which we, of course, all have also at Slater and the industry at large. He also said it's kind of a unique opportunity right now to position RWS and also the entire industry as kind of the expert in the enterprise content lifecycle. And I can't stress this enough. I really do think now is a pivotal moment for everybody to make sure that we as industry experts do position ourselves as these experts. There's so many more people coming in with a lot less sophisticated approaches to things, and I think we can really be there for clients to help. I also liked how he closed. It was kind of a nice, kind of a tagline, right? Bye translators and hello language specialists.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye. So kind of obviously meant with deep respect for the linguists here, the experts in the loop, as we're trying to kind of reposition the translators and the linguists here, as language specialists. So yeah, overall, super interesting presentation. Also, I think a few days afterwards, they announced that kind of a bit of a board changes. Andrew Brody, the one of the biggest shareholders and former chairman of RWS, is stepping back, and he's staying on the board, but I don't think he's no longer going to be chairman. Now, if you look back at, it must have been, I don't know when he kind of bought into RWS, but it must have been more than a decade, 1.5 decades. I mean, what a buy and build strategy, right? I mean, must have covered about 10 acquisitions by RWS and took them from when we started Slater in like 2016, 15, like from a fairly kind of obscure patent translation company to now like a top 2, top 3 super agency in the world on, very well executed buy and build. So yeah, now stepping back, no longer chairman. And of course, very good team there with Ian and his executive team. All right, so very briefly, also, I did share kind of, that was part of my presentation, that like translation is having a viral moment. I mean, has all this stuff like shown up on your timeline on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever, X already as well, or is it just my bubble here?
No, there's certainly a lot. Yeah. And I think obviously social media, yes, and the sort of the things that you're following, but I think also just circulating in, wider conversation as well.
The one that really blew up on my timeline was this kind of HeyGen lip sync dubbing test. So there was this, marginally large account. I mean, I think it's 10, 20,000 followers on X. And he did like a kind of a selfie experiment where he like just kind of filmed himself speaking for like 1 or 2 minutes, uploaded it to a tool called HeyGen, had it lip synced and translated, so translated and then lip synced accordingly, and then did it for French and German, kind of fairly basic dialogue, but like just they've got like 10 million views and just a lot of traffic. And then HeyGen's website like basically exploded, and they had like a queue of people of like 150,000 that were trying to do the same. So basically had their break their system and break their AWS bill. But long story short, very busy space right now. We had Mars on the podcast, you had HeyGen, you have on the enterprise side, Deep Dub, for Hollywood. So kind of there's this viral component right now where like translation AI has never been more top of mind with the general public. And it's very interesting, just from an insider's point of view, of course. Now, there was also what we noted at Slaticon is that there's a big slowdown in VC funding. Let's not unpack this right now, but there's various factors that are contributing to this. But one company that managed to raise what they call a Series A, although they did raise a number of previous times, but now it's a Series A, is Intento. So tell us more about that, Esther.
Well, yeah. So I think a good lead-in. Intento, many in the industry will be familiar with, a machine translation company, and they're now describing themselves as machine translation and multilingual generative AI platform for global enterprises. So they have announced Series A funding of $8 million. So yeah, nice wedge for MT and for generative AI there.
Yeah, let's unpack it. I mean, also it's so interesting that like we also kept talking at the conference about, on the one hand, you have like this industry that's apparently being put under a lot of pressure by AI, like the broader language services industry, right? If you look at it from the outside, right? And then you have this massive AI boom on the other side. And I think Intento is sitting kind of in the middle here. Like on the one hand, they're perceived as, basically wedded to the localization, translation, machine translation industry. On the other hand, of course, they're very early adopters of all these large language models. They've built enterprise workflows that people can use. And so yeah, I mean, looks like they've convinced some investors to fund that. Not looks like. I mean, they did convince some investors to fund that Series A with $8 million, which then obviously they're going to use for building. Interesting statement they put in a press release. They said that Somersault Ventures, one of the VCs that was in there, said that translation services and technologies is a crowded space for investors. But that's why there's other factors why they like how Intento. They're saying Intento is building a truly unique product with a forward-looking approach to press to address what large enterprises need. So interesting to hear from an investor that they're thinking that translation services and technologies is a crowded space for investors. Yeah, I guess you could argue about that.
There's more room, I suppose, but obviously people are selective with who and when they invest. So.
I mean, in terms of the sizes of these rounds, I mean, we just had Writer.com, Writer, like to write, Writer, raised, $100 million. So, and that was not for translation. That was just for, generative AI content creation. So anyway, congratulations to Konstantin and the team to this round, and looking forward to seeing what they're going to build. On a less positive note, tell us more about Zoo's struggles with strikes and losses and everything.
Yeah, I think we've spoken about this company and also this particular sort of trend a few times, including in editorial coverage. But Zoo Digital, which is the UK-based media localization provider, listed in the UK, they have come out saying that they're now expecting a significant EBITDA loss in H1, the first half. So they've got a calendar year that runs, I think, end March to March. So the first 6 months is going to close, or has closed, at the end of September 2023. But obviously it takes a little bit of time to kind of close up all the accounts and then report it. But they have warned investors of significant EBITDA loss, and they say this is linked to strikes in Hollywood, which again we've spoken about many times. But now it seems to be actually having a kind of tangible impact, at least on Zoo's financial performance. So as a result, I mean, shortly after the announcement, you can look at the share price of listed companies, and Zoo's share price fell 20% overall since the beginning of its own financial year. So I think since April, the shares have fallen by about 80% or around 80%. It's sort of strange timing because on the one hand, Zoo has also just reported or kind of closed out its full year, which ended, like I said, at the end of March 2023. So in that year, which obviously would have sort of taken into account a lot of 2022 calendar year, they had really good growth, posted something, I think it was like $95 million was their full year revenues. And then also when we look at what's happening with the strikes, which obviously is the event or the situation that they're sort of attributing a lot of the upset to, the Writers Guild of America has just, the leadership has just voted to end the strike in Hollywood. I think a couple of weeks back now. So on the one hand, they're coming off, a really solid full year of growth. On the other hand, things are starting to look up in the debate or strikes in Hollywood. But then obviously, as they're saying, the effect has been a significant short-term impact. And then there's also the Screen Actors Guild. So writers, I think, seems to be mostly resolved now, but the Screen Actors Guild's strikes are still ongoing. Zoo's expecting significant short-term impact, and the chairman was saying that orders in the first half have been and continue to be at historically low levels. And she went on to say H1 first half revenues are expected to be approximately $21 million, which I think last year in their first half it was 51 million. So this has basically sliced their revenues by more than half. And as a result, significant EBITDA loss for the first half of the current financial year, which would have been, I think, 20. Are we in the 20? We must be in the 2024 financial year for them. I can't quite remember which way it works, but I think this is H1 24.
Bit of a black swan, huh? With those strikes, who would have thought? Double whammy. Basically, you get COVID and then backlog. And then boom, and now, writer and and actor strike.
Hopefully for Zoo, and also I suppose this is an indicator of not just for Zoo but also for other media localization companies. Hopefully the impact of particularly the strikes won't be lasting and will be resolved. And in the meantime, Zoo is continuing to expand. So it announced recently that it was expanding its investment in Zoo Turkey. So people might remember that back in November 2021, Zoo did an initial strategic investment in a company called Ares Media, which was then rebranded to Zoo Turkey. So they have now done an additional strategic investment in that company. And also it was not just Zoo Turkey, but I think they opened India, South Korea, a number of other international hubs as part of that kind of international expansion plan also.
Into English dubbing, like Turkey, South Korea, a lot of content production happening in those markets. So
they're probably not doing the into English dubbing in those particular hubs though. They're probably, leveraging the demand for local content in those markets, right?
Yeah. All right. Scratch that comment.
No, but it's still a relevant trend. Those markets are fueling demand for into English dubbing. That is very true, and I'm sure Zoo being UK based is also hoping at least to capitalize on some of that demand.
Now, one company that kind of sits in the middle, like not on the Hollywood spectrum, I guess, just yet, but still in that multimedia space is XL8. And actually their chief revenue officer joined us at SlaterCon. Actually did an interview. We should be uploading it on YouTube any day now. Josh Pine, that is the CRO. We also had Tim Young on the podcast. Last year, yeah. So tell us, they actually managed to raise a $7.5 million Series A. So that's $500,000 less than Intento.
Yeah, $500,000, less. Yeah, if there was a competition. This was actually a while ago. I think it's only in September that they decided to disclose that they raised that amount of money. So I think the round, what they told us was that it actually closed in May 2023, which was just before or shortly before they acquired a transcription and translation provider called AHT. You might remember our coverage of that.
They should tell us in May. Should have told us in May. Why keep this a secret?
Ideally, yeah, they would have told us in May, but we covered it recently. So total funds raised for XL8 now is 11.5 million US dollars. After that, like you said, Florian, $7.5 million raise back in May. And they shared the valuation. According to Tim, the CEO, the round valued XL8 at around 60 million US dollars.
Oh, they did. $60 million? Nice.
They haven't released anything around, obviously profitability or revenues, because people don't tend to like to
Series
share
A
that.
shouldn't be profitable, I guess. Yeah.
Well, there you go. Okay, well, revenues, they haven't shared anything on that specifically, but they have said interest in XL8 this year has been off the charts, was the comment. And I mean, he also added, this is Tim, that in 2023, there's been a realization that AI has to be integrated into the modern localization workflow. So I think, very much a theme that we're seeing here. And in terms of what they're going to do with the money, they will continue to enhance the product offerings, including leveraging generative AI, and plan to expand further internationally. So they've got currently these two main products, which are MediaCat, which is an AI media localization sort of workflow system, and EventCat, which is remote simultaneous interpreting for events.
You know who else has come to the realization that AI has to be integrated into the modern localization workflow? Adobe.
Oh, Adobe, cool.
Adobe, yeah. So we picked up on a press release, and we're going to dig into this a bit further, but this is just like our hot take here. So Adobe released something called a Sneak Showcase. They at their conference, they released so-called 11 inventions that are featured in Adobe's annual Sneaks Showcase, where Adobe engineers and research scientists offer first looks or sneak peeks at prototype ideas and technologies, each showing future potentially become important elements of Adobe products, blah, 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 blah. Now, under the video and audio showcases, one is called Project, wait for it, Dub. So 3 dubs. Yeah, not just dub, because, dub's taken. Now you go dub. If I was dub, and there's dub AI, right? I think company based in India. Now Adobe's come out with dub. Maybe tomorrow it's going to be Google dub. So basically saying that dub automates the video dubbing process, making a historically labor and cost intensive process as easy as clicking a button, yada, yada, yada. So more AI dubbing, but this time obviously from one of the biggest tech companies in the world, Adobe. And kind of just goes to show how deeply embedded these types of language AI technologies are now becoming, right? And I mean, this is kind of a mix between video and audio and language and translation and lip sync and everything. But, if Adobe feels that this is a good feature to go after, then they're not going to be alone. There's going to be others. And I wonder who's going to win that race, right? So there's kind of the more dedicated startups, there's the big companies, there's the Hollywood-focused ones, then there's, the tech giants that are just use this as a feature in their overall product line. So incredibly interesting, the AI dubbing space, and we'll be digging into this a lot more. But for now, dub. Let's see if it ever sees the light of day and in some type of Adobe application. All right, that was it for today's Brief News podcast. Thanks so much for listening in, and see you next time.
Thanks. Bye.